Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Title I 1003 School Improvement Grant Launch webinar for the 21-22 school year. My name is Sarah McCaslin. I am new to the TEA team. I'll be working as a grant specialist. I'm excited to come alongside you guys and support you in this upcoming grant work. Here's some contact information. If at any point you have a question, feel free to reach out to Alice, our manager of grant strategy and alignment, or myself using the email addresses that you see here. Also note that we will be publishing a FAQ with a comprehensive list of questions that are gathered at the live training, and that will be made available for you guys to reference as you need it. So let's get started by reviewing today's agenda. First, we're just going to go over some general information and review any updates of the Title I 1003 School Improvement Grant. Afterwards, we'll take a look at the application process. This includes what's happening in eGrants, what's happening in our Plan for Learning, sometimes referred to as 806 Technologies platform. We'll discuss a change that's been made to the campus allocation document. Afterwards, we'll look at how you can link funds to your campus's target improvement plans. And then we'll finish with some key takeaways and reminders. We'll look at a grant timeline, and then we'll finish with some questions and feedback at the end. All right, so first, here are some general information, reminders, and updates on this year's school improvement grant. The Division of School Improvement will offer a non-competitive grant for LEAs that have at least one Title I Part A served comprehensive support and improvement identified campus. This LEA must also have received the Title I 1003 School Improvement Grant from the previous 2021 school year. This grant will be available to qualifying LEAs on September 13th. So LEAs must have submitted a commitment to engage in intervention and supports in order to receive funding. These interventions look like the development and submission of a targeted improvement plan, progress monitoring, and other supports from the Division of School Improvement. The survey went out this previous summer. If you did not have a chance, or there are still campuses in your LEA that you believe should submit an opt-in survey, please reach out to myself or Alice, and we can work with you on a need-by-need basis to get you caught up. So this year, each campus that does opt in to continue their interventions will receive an allocation of $14,285 per campus, and the LEA will be able to retain any unused funds as carryover from the 2020-2021 Title I 1003 School Improvement Grant. In order to retain use of funds throughout the grant year, certain criteria must be met. So all of the opt-in comprehensive support and improvement schools must engage in the Effective Schools Framework process. This could be self-assessments, diagnostics, creation and development of a targeted improvement plan, and of course, compliance reports as well. The submission process for these documents is a little bit different this year, as there is a new platform being used for targeted improvement plan requirements. So each of these campus requirements are now submitted through the Plan for Learning 806 Technologies portal, which is automatically going to sync to ISAM, which has been used in years past. So we'll discuss this further in just a minute. Another requirement is that in order to grow a network of support, documentation of evidence of support from the LEA's Education Service Center or vetted improvement programs are necessary. And so we want you guys to utilize these entities as capacity builders. Additionally, your campus intervention teams will need to be assigned, and those must include a district coordinator of school improvement, a DCSI, or the principal supervisor. And then these teams are responsible for conducting needs assessments. Lastly, certain staff, the DCSI, the principal supervisor will be required to attend all trainings. that are pertinent to this grant. Okay, so from here, we're going to open up a mock application and review the completion procedures. And first, we will start with the application requirements on behalf of the LEAs. So we're going to dig into the eGrants application and see what it is that the LEAs are going to be filling out. So note that each LEA will submit one application on behalf of all of their opt-in schools. So it doesn't matter if it's one school, if it's 100 schools. This application can be found in the eGrants website beginning September 13th. And remember, it's all encompassing of your opt-in schools. On this application, you will find the general applicant information section, program description documents, necessary budget codes and summaries, as well as a certification of assurances and provisions. So we'll go ahead and take a closer look now with this application. All right, so you will go to the grant opportunities page and you'll search for the 21-22 Title I School Improvement Grant application. Once you're able to locate it and open it up, you'll have a designation form and then the grant application form. Your designation form should already be populated with this Apply on Own button. If not, you'll click here. You'll insert your certification statement so you can use the drop-down menu to select a contact. You'll click Certify and Submit. And then your grant application will be made available to you if not already. So let's go ahead and look at our grant application. And we'll just go through this as if we're filling out one on behalf of an actual LEA. So the first piece before any of these other options will open is the GS 2100, and this is your applicant information. Your part 1 will already be populated. Okay, so your organization information as well as the DUNS number will already be here. Part 2, you're just selecting your primary and secondary contacts. Please check, double check, and triple check that this information is correct. That way it saves us from any bumps in the road later on. You can either select from the drop-down menu, make sure that they're different, or you can add a new contact if your district has seen any shifts in personnel. Okay, I'm going to double check the information. I'm going to click Save. It says that my data has been successfully saved with no errors. I'm going to click OK, and I'll be able to go back to my table of contents. All right, so now other application forms have popped up on my screen. So starting from the top, we'll start with the PS 3010. This is your program abstract and needs assessment. It will designate already whether or not you're dealing with an open enrollment charter school, depending on the district you're in. Part 2 is talking about LEA reserve funds, and we'll talk a little bit more about what this means later. If your district is choosing to use LEA funds for this grant specifically, you cannot exceed 50% of the award that you've been given. And you'll need to, in this box, describe how those funds are being used. So for example, you could talk about how specific schools within the district feeder pattern are also needing some of these funds. This could be technology, this could be professional development, this could be the use of PLC development. You'll just put those designations here. Part 3 is strategies to support your comprehensive campuses. In this section, you'll pay attention to the action steps that your district has deemed necessary for improvement. Could be 2 or 3 of them. And then you're going to designate if your school improvement service is provided by an education service center, if it's provided by an external vetted improvement partner, or if it is provided by a local effort. Just bear in mind that your district needs to have the actual capacity to help the school improvement action step if you are selecting local efforts. So let's say that we've got these right here, and then we can click Save. No warnings, so they go back. Once I've done this piece, I can move on to the PS 3400. This is the equitable access and participation form. All I'm deciding here is if no, there are no barriers to equitable access, or yes, there are barriers that exist to equitable access for groups receiving these grant funds. So let's say I choose yes, there are barriers. It's now telling me that I need to add at least one barrier for my drop-down menu. So first I'm going to choose who the barrier is affecting. Let's say I'm choosing students. Let's say that my district or my campus, we have language barriers. Other examples could be high mobility rates. Other examples could be transportation. Okay, so of course you would add a different line item for each of these barriers, but this just demonstrates where your description will go. So you can add and remove lines as needed. So I'm going to go ahead and click save, no errors, go back to my table of contents. And now I'm going to start with the budget section, and this takes up the bulk of the application. So I'm going to start with the BS 6001. And this is my budget summary. So up here, you're going to see that the award amount is pre-populated for you, okay? Carryover funds for this grant are not going to populate in the budget summary until mid-December. So you guys still have access to last year's 2021 school improvement grant funds. And until those close out at the end of this month and are settled, then you will not see that amount in carryover populate until December 17th. So for example, let's say our total funds are $100,000. In part 2, I'm able to designate where I want that $100,000 to be allocated. So in line item number 1 is called consolidated administrative funds. This grant does allow for up to 5% of your total grant award to be reserved for administrative costs. What this means is that it allows the LEA to charge administrative costs to a pool of funds rather than assigning specific administrative costs to a specific grant program. So you can check yes or no. Let's say no, we're not utilizing that feature. And now I can start to designate where I want my $100,000 to go. Let's say for payroll costs, this constitutes instructional positions, substitutes, employee benefits, stipends, incentives, those sorts of things. Let's say I want 30,000 of my dollars in payroll costs. For professional and contracted services, this could be maintenance of grant funded equipment. Usually this is contracted services with your education service center or the vetted improvement programs. Let's say I want 20,000 allocated there. Supplies and materials, textbooks, workbooks, consumables, audio visuals. Let's say I'm designating 15,000. Other operating costs, this could be in-state travel, conference fees, training fees. Let's say that's another 15,000. Okay. Capital outlay, we'll talk more specifically about this category later, but let's say that that's going to be $10,000. Operating transfers out. This is rarely used. So if you are going to utilize line number 8, then we would be happy to work with you on a case-by-case basis to address what that looks like. So for now, I'll leave it blank. And then you have a section for indirect costs as well. Indirect costs still go towards helping the grant be implemented in your LEA, but it doesn't necessarily have to do with school improvement. And so I'm actually just going to say that there's 5,000, and let's adjust these other numbers because I have another 10 grand. So let's add another 5 there. Whoops. And there we go. All right, so it's going to sum my total direct costs, sum my indirect costs, and then it matches. So I've got a $100,000 award, $100,000 have been accounted for. When looking at pre-award costs, please keep in mind that from August 1st to the day that you submit your application through eGrants is considered the pre-award period. And you have the opportunity to budget out those costs that you have already incurred. So let's say that I have budgeted $30,000 here for payroll. Let's say from the time that school started to September 1st, I had already used 5,000 of those dollars. You need to remember that the pre-award costs are not in addition to. So when I say that payroll costs are 30,000 total, pre-award is telling me I've already used 5,000 of those dollars. This does not sum to $35,000. So pre-award is not in addition to. But you do need to make sure that you are representing your pre-award costs as best as you can in these columns here. Okay, so I'm going to save it. It has not detected any errors, so I click OK and go back to my table of contents. And then now that I have filled out the budget summary, it's going to open up these other sub-documents that have to do with those budget codes. So the first one is the BS 6101. This is payroll costs. Your total payroll costs will already be auto-populated up here based on what you entered in the budget summary report. Here you have the opportunity to designate how much of those funds are going to be administrative or clerical staff for the grant itself. In B, you have the opportunity to say whether or not professional, paraprofessional, or administrative staff at the LEA level is used in these payroll funds. Or in C, where professional, paraprofessional, or administrative staff at the campus level used to support this grant from the 30,000 allocated dollars for payroll costs. So let's say that in LEA positions, I had professional staff, and in campus positions, I had paraprofessional and professional staff. In part 3, this is where you're indicating whether or not your payroll costs went to substitute, extra duty, benefits, stipends, incentives, those types of things. So let's say that part of my payroll costs were extra duty paid beyond normal hours. I'll check that box. And then in part 4 is a confirmation statement saying that you understand the payroll requirements of this grant. So I'm going to click save. No errors were detected. Okay. Back to my table of contents, and I'm going to move on to the BS 6201, professional and contracted services. So it has already pre-populated that $20,000 were used as general 6,200 professional and contracted services. So if you by chance have used part of these funds, part of your $20,000, you plan on using that for rental or lease of buildings, you can designate it here. If you plan on or have used any of those funds for professional or consulting services outside of the LEAs, outside of the VIPs, you can designate it here. Otherwise, if you're just using those $20,000 for costs that do not require specific approval, then you're done. You can hit save, no errors, back to the table of contents, and you can move on. The next one is other operating costs, the BS 6401. So again, other operating costs include things like in-state travel and conference fees. If your $15,000 that you've budgeted only encompasses costs that do not require specific approval, then you can leave it here and save. If you do plan on these other object codes, perhaps you do have out-of-state travel or educational field trips, those require specific approval. There are justification forms that need to be filled out, and I'll show you where those are at a different time. You can enter those amounts here. Again, they may or may not apply. So we're going to click save. No errors detected. Back to my table of contents. And now we have the BS 6501. This is debt services. As soon as you come here, it's going to give you a note. There are no costs budgeted because there is, these are not funds that are approved by this grant. So you'll click OK. You'll save it as it says to do. No errors, and then you'll go back. All right. One last budget form is the BS 6601. This is capital outlay. Costs that you may encumber that qualify as capital expenditures may be library books and media. They may be things for additions, improvements, or modifications to some capital assets that you already have. Please keep in mind there is a stipulation that per unit of capital expenditures can only go up to $5,000 per that individual item. So I have budgeted $10,000 for capital outlay costs, and let's say that all 10,000 of those dollars have to do with my library books. So I'm going to save. No errors are detected. Back to my table of contents, and I've got one form left. That is the CS 7000, and this is provisions, assurances, and certifications. So your authorized official is going to check the boxes that you have in fact come over here and reviewed the necessary guidelines. You will check all the boxes. Please note for number 5, it's either or. So yes, you spend federal funds on lobbying activities, or no. I'm going to say that I do not. Check the other boxes, hit save. And just as a demonstration, let's say I don't check box number 7 and I click save. It's going to show errors. So errors, line 7, you must certify your acceptance. So I'm going to go back and check number 7, click save, no errors, back to my table of contents. So at this point, I can see that the status of all my application requirements are complete, okay? And it'll timestamp it for you. From here, you have the opportunity to certify and submit. We will get your application, and that's when we will start to process it. All right. Okay. As a reminder, some of the funds will require a justification of expenditures report. In this case, for this particular grant, that could be out-of-state travel, or that could mean educational field trips. So this URL here is where you can find the forms that you need for those line items. So now we're going to take a look at how this Plan for Learning tool is going to be utilized by your specific campuses. So the eGrants application for LEAs is paralleled to the Plan for Learning platform used by each specific campus. Just as the LEA enters budget summary information on the eGrants application, so does each campus or their designated specialist enter their budget allocations in the Plan for Learning tool. So 2 things to keep in mind moving forward. The first is that what we're going to demonstrate totally replaces the campus allocation document that's been used in years past. And the second thing is when you're entering campus-specific budget allocations in the Plan for Learning tool, keep in mind that each budgeted item can and should reflect the targeted improvement plan action step that your campus has chosen to work on. And we'll go in and demonstrate that here in a second. So here is a little screen grab of the previous campus allocation document or spreadsheet. Again, this has been replaced. So as we're going in and entering budget information on the Plan for Learning tool, that is going to take the place of this single document submission that's been used previously. When the campus is developing the targeted improvement plan, it needs to consider the school improvement grant as a resource and capacity builder. So as campuses are filling in their budget designations, keep in mind your areas of improvement and make sure that the designated funds are matching those priorities. As the campus identifies needed resources, the campuses and LEAs should consider how to leverage the school improvement grant funds to support those resource needs. So we're going to go ahead and navigate to this page and demonstrate how your campuses will fill out their targeted improvement plan. And in doing so, we're able to see how the school improvement grant funds directly correspond to that targeted improvement plan. So this is your sign-in page. And once you log in, you will see something to this effect, although of course it will be different for you. The first thing you'll need to do is navigate to the left-hand side and choose the Essential Actions drop-down menu, and then choose the Essential Actions form. On the right-hand side, you'll be able to see a budget summary. And remember, these budget codes align exactly to the eGrants application. 6,100 payroll, 6,200 professional and contracted services, and so on. If these amounts are wrong and need to be changed, you can click the Edit Budget Object Codes, and you'll be able to go in and adjust as needed. Okay, you can save, and you'll be able to move on. All right. Now, when you open up your Cycles tab, you'll be able to see the essential actions that your campus has designated as levers that they're working on in their targeted improvement plan. So let's say that we come down to cycle 1. We've chosen that we're working on essential action 5.1. Let's add a new action step. Once we click add a new action step, there we go, it's all the way at the bottom. Once we click add a new action step, we'll be prompted to fill in these categories. So I'm actually just going to copy and paste some examples. So let's say that for 5.1, we're saying that the campus leadership team will attend training on critical thinking, productive struggle and differentiation, and norms on how to evaluate these in classroom observations. The evidence that we will use, training schedules and notes from those trainings. The people responsible, let's say it's the DCSI, the principal. The resources needed. Let's say our resources are the time to attend that training, permission from the district to attend, and then coverage if necessary. You'll have to indicate whether or not this addresses an identified challenge. Let's say no. And here's where we get to see exactly how our funds are leveraged by the targeted improvement plan. So we're going to click add a funding source. In order to accomplish this, the resource I may need is professional development. Okay. I'm going to select my budget object code. Things like professional development are going to fall under 6,200. If you have internal account codes that your district uses, feel free to enter them here. And then you can select the amount, okay? So over here on the right-hand side, I see that I've allocated $38,000 for professional and contracted services. Let's say for this particular professional development, it's going to cost $2,500. Once I add my funding source and save, it's automatically going to deduct from my total amount over here. So at one point it was 38, now it's 35.5. And you'll be able to do this with each new action step that you add for each of the cycles and each of the levers that you've chosen in your targeted improvement plan. Okay, so we've talked about how each campus will connect their school improvement grant funds to their targeted improvement action steps. Targeted improvement plan action steps within the Plan for Learning platform. So now we'll mention some other important ways that campuses can leverage their school improvement grant funds while keeping in mind their tip. The district should be thoughtful about how school improvement grant funds can be used on vetted improvement programs as well as education service centers. So please take advantage of your VIPs and ESCs, okay? Many opportunities for building capacity, streamlining, and supporting work exist at those levels. The DCSI and the superintendent should work closely to build a strong relationship with the district CFO, CEO, business manager that's responsible for drawing down grant funds. And we recommend that LEAs draw down those funds once a month or at least quarterly. As we've discussed prior, LEAs are able to reserve up to 50% of their school improvement grant funds to support students entering or exiting comprehensive support and improvement campuses. LEAs reserve these funds to support campuses within one level in direct feeder pattern with some of the following items in mind, as mentioned earlier: technology for staff and students, professional development, PLC collaboration, subs to ensure that PLC time is met, or perhaps participation in cohorts or other vetted improvement programs. So as we wrap up, we're going to go over some key takeaways as well as a timeline of what you can expect and how this grant will move forward. Maybe you're at the point where you totally understand the eGrants application and the Plan for Learning tool. Maybe you still don't 100% understand the relationship between the two. If you fall into the latter category, then here is one last kind of visual to hopefully allow you to understand their distinctions and their connections. So both the eGrants application and the Plan for Learning tool help their relative parties designate school improvement grant funds. Additionally, both the eGrants application and the Plan for Learning tool, where your tip is entered, are requirements for this school improvement grant. However, the eGrants application is filled out one time by the LEA on behalf of all of their opt-in campuses, and it's going to show the overall district budget summary. The Plan for Learning platform is used by each opt-in campus within that LEA to show campus-specific budget allocations as they directly relate to their targeted improvement plan action steps. One last reminder on eligibility: LEAs who have one or more Title I served schools identified on the comprehensive support and improvement list that did also submit their commitment to interventions do meet eligibility requirements. As far as our timeline is concerned, the grant application opens on September 13th. The grant application closes on November 12th. 60 days later. The initial budget submission is due by October 1st. Your final award amount, remember that includes carryover funds, will be populated on your budget summary December 17th. There will be a mid-cycle check March 4th, and then the grant cycle itself ends at the end of September 2022. All right. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to watch this webinar. Our team appreciates your local efforts in supporting school improvement work. Please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or to Alice for assistance or for questions. And we look forward to supporting you guys in the work moving forward.